What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today. Today we're gonna do a Granblue premium deck profile. This is for the August of 2022. This is something that I've been experimenting. I'm gonna go over some of the winning image, the big picture, go into the card choices, and actually show off some plays that people may not be used to as well. I keep commonly get asked, or they find out during Metafy sessions that they're not aware of some of the line of plays that Granblue has access to. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Check out Nex LvL Gaming's playmats, and they actually have a lot of mats with your favorite units. They're great quality playmats too as well, and you can use the affiliated link as a 10% discount on your next purchase. Also, I've become an official Metafy coach for Cardfight Vanguard, and so if you ever want to get one-on-one time with me to help your skill level, go ahead and book a session with me. I can help with premium format, standard, or even clans like Aqua Force and many others, and even YouTube as well. I just want to help fellow amigos and make an impact within the community itself. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message too. You can use the link down below in the description to book your session as well.
Onto the winning image. So we have a lot of choices, as you can see, and so why there's so many cards on the board right now is just to kind of highlight over what the winning images do. So really our first stride as a Beatrice focused deck will be Obadiah 9 times out of 10, and so that's really for setup. You'll notice as you play this deck, it's not as aggressive as a pure Night Rose deck profile. So with that, you kind of have to keep in mind the long game too, but there are other cards such as Bilber over here and a few others to help you build up that drop zone quickly, so you may be able to go into first stride Bat Bounty. That's possible still. And really what that second or third or even first stride, potentially if you mill good enough, would be Bat Bounty, the new Bartholomew, or even like a Megiddo backup win con. So we have multiple win cons, and really what the Bat Bounty does is that it rewrites another grade 3. So if you rode that same turn with a break ride and then re-rode with Night Rose with the Bat Bounty's skill, you'll trigger a break ride and you can revive 2 units during the battle phase for free. So you can keep reviving Skull Dragons, keep attacking and extending attacks that way. And then Night Rose will continue to revive more cards and be able to produce 2 more Skull Dragon attacks at the minimum, because you can revive cards like Nightstorm to multi-attack even further. And one of the late game win cons we have is Bartholomew, and its first skill is very similar to Night Rose, where on attack you can call up to 3 units with different card names and call them to Regard Circle. They also get power too, which is really nice, an extra plus 5k. And then the second skill is what really makes this card a potential finisher, is that once you reach 30 cards more into the drop zone, your opponent has to guard with at least 3 cards from hand when they guard from hand. So that demands a lot of cards from hand per attack, and it's a continuous. So that means that any regard attack that attacks will see the benefit of that, and for each attack they have to do that. So you can see with just 5 attacks, 5 times 3 is 15 cards from hand at the minimum. So that's assuming that they have to guard with everything from hand, or not take a damage, or not G-guard, or even blitz orders get around there too. So blitz orders are technically played in the other order zone. They're not called from hand into the Guardian Circle. So little things get around that, but for the most part, it's really powerful. And so that's why you can even mimic it in the sense of a Night Rose, where you can call, and I'll show the combo play, you can call multiple Skull Dragons still on top of that. And then lastly, we have the Megiddo. So the Megiddo's backup, really, we are only playing 3 Skull Dragons, which I'll go into the more card choices, is that you revive the Skull Dragons, another beater like a Ghost Ship, and then of course you got Nightstorm to further extend. So ideally you need 3 Counterblasts to do that play, but it's a different win con. Especially if you really don't have the resources, except for Skull Dragons and a couple beaters, then might as well go into Megiddo. So that's what it's there for. Kind of alluding to down over here, Beatrice is great for defensive purposes for the most part. It gives plus 5k for every ghosty card shield value wise. So if you have ghosty cards that you defend with, they're plus 5k shield extra. Not only that, she gives intercept too. So you have your front ghosties, such as another copy of herself, you can intercept for a 5k shield. It's just one of those extra nice things. And when it's placed, just in general, you can Soul Blast 1 to revive something. That's Vanguard or Regard, which is super beneficial. So on ride, you can do a number of things where you can revive Greed Shade, you can revive Columbard and do something before you even stride. Especially if you didn't have the copy of or another grade 3 just to pay the cost of stride, you can revive Greed Shade and then get a grade 3 from your drop and then use that as a stride fodder. So you're pretty much good to go on that. There's so many interactions, which is really cool. I won't highlight everything because it is a lot. I'll highlight some of the key ones that I think that need to be shown more recently. Going into these units more, so you may notice this Bilber card. So this is a stoicheia unit. So this is from the stoicheia overdress support, and really what it does is that it's an act. You can Soul Blast 1, retire this unit, and look at the top 3 cards, and then superior call 1 to the back row, and then mill the rest of the cards. So, and also that unit cannot move up to the front row for that turn. So you can call free boosters for that turn, but then the next turn you can move them as like attackers, beaters. Cards like Skull Dragon, Ghost Ship can superior call that way. Which is really nice because they can't be called by normal methods from the hand. You have to revive it, and Bilber is another way to like superior call it from the deck in that sense. And it's almost like Skeleton Seas Navigator, where you're milling your drop zone by retiring itself, by Soul Blasting 1, and then milling 2 other cards. That's 4 cards into the drop zone already. So you're already filling up your board and filling up your drop zone. Which is really cool and appreciated. And so this can also tie into more combos, and this can superior call a Columbard or a Greed Shade, and you can further extend even on grade 1 turn, which is kind of ridiculous. But that's assuming you have a counterblast for Columbard. But once you get to grade 2, then you can use Columbard freely. If you don't have it, if you don't open up with it, if you didn't ride it, that's another option that you could potentially run into. And Greed Shade just further extends, increasing the quality of your hand for ride consistency and defensive purposes, but it's just super helpful. And that lets me transition with the Rollock, and the Rollock is here for more defensive with all the metagame. There's a lot of aggression within the metagame that it's really appreciated just having cards like Rollock to be able to 1-card PG any attack. This could be Nightmare Dolls, this could be Aqua Force, it can be Eradicators or Norakami in general, and other clans like that just multi-attack in some fashion. So having a Rollock is just super helpful, and especially if you're going to fight for first stride, this deck can fight for first stride pretty effectively. So that's why even cards like Rollock add to that benefit too, so it makes you survive a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about some aggressive grade 3 turn blowing you out. And so without further ado, let's get into the card choices and go from there. Go into the grade 3s, we're playing 4 Beatrice, 3 Skull Dragon, 1 of each of these 3. And for the grade 3 heals, so as you can see, we're playing about 10 grade 3 normal units with the 4 grade 3 heals. So Beatrice is going to be your main Vanguard for starting off, and it helps set up with the superior calling of like a free call. Essentially, you Soul Blast 1, revive something. You have a defensive capability, and then if you so happen to use her 3rd skill, when a Rigard is retired by your card's ability during your turn, you can counterblast 1 and revive a card with Ghosty in its card name that's 1 grade less. That's a grade less than that card, so you can have some aggression. Especially if you revive a Skull Dragon, it self-retires, so that triggers that ability, so you can keep going down to grade 2, grade 1, grade 0 Ghosties. But most of the time, it's the first 2 skills. And really with the Skull Dragons, I would say at least 3, if not 4, because you still want to have a beater. This gets plus 2k for every card in the drop zone. So imagine once you get to 10 cards, it's plus 20k, so let's mix it at 32. And it's a lot easier to get to 10 cards by your first stride with the cards that we have to. If you don't play cards like Bilber or the help like Mill, especially if you play a maximum Greed Shade, it may be a little bit challenged, which you rely more on the overdress stride. Until Skull Dragon can actually become a beater itself in the late game. So there are chances where you can call Skull Dragon with Bilber, like as I mentioned, and they can be easy beater to just take some aggression. And what's really cool too is that if you're in the grade 2 game and you superior call a Skull Dragon with a Necrobone or like a Bilber, you can stay at grade 2 and still have access to a grade 3 beater like Skull Dragon, which is really cool. It's just, it makes it a lot easier to fight for first stride. And so going into the other ones, we have 1-ofs. So you want to have at least a 1-of Night Rose over here, and this is when, again, the bad bounty turn, when you ride it, you can use the skill where it attacks, you can kind of blast 1, revive a column. Now the play is that basically you revive a Beatrice with a Skull Dragon in the column, and then the Beatrice can revive the second Skull Dragon on the other side. So you can have multiple Skull Dragon attacks. It's usually called the 4 Skull Dragon attack, but you can do it in premium with a bad bounty on top of that. And then of course, you can extend more of the Skull Dragon attacks with these 2 cards. And Night Mist, when it's rode upon, then you can revive up to 2 cards. This is assuming that you have Limit Break 4, which is 4 damage or more. And you can keep reviving Skull Dragons that way, so you can extend from what you usually would have 4 Skull Dragon attacks to now 6. And that's a lot of attacks already, especially Skull Dragon being such a high powerful card. And so just having this at the right time, it can be game finishing. And with Nightstorm, it's just really at the end of the battle, you can Counterblast 1, revive something. So this is your battle phase attack extender. And you can revive Beatrice. Beatrice can then revive a Skull Dragon. So just by a Counterblast into a Soul Blast, you could generate 2 more attacks before you get into your Skull Dragon. So there's chaining attacks, and it takes some time to get used to in practice to know what's worth it and what's not worth it, because just because you have open Counterblast doesn't mean you should use it all in Granblue. You have to manage your resources. There's only so many countercharging cards that you want to prioritize while being aggressive, while setting up your turn, while doing a bunch of other things at the same time. So it's super helpful. And the grade 3 heals are played because, again, you want to survive in that early game, and these cards are phenomenal to do that. You can reduce crits, you can make your Vanguard plus 10k. I do play a grade 2 stoicheia unit, so your 10k base, this can make it 20 or 30 if you open up with 2. So it makes that survival rate a lot higher and super beneficial. And what's really cool is that Greed Shade can grab this from Drop Zone if you milled it. And this can be also used for the Cost of Stride or G-Guarding later on. So this grade 3 heal is just useful in all times of the game. So it's just super impactful. We are playing 10 grade 2s. We are playing 4 Greed Shade, 3 Columbard, 1 Cannoneer, 1 Ghost Ship, and 1 of the Clapping Dragon of Soul Revolution. Till right now, I didn't know its name. Or I forgot, and I just it's the one that, its skill essentially is that if you did 5 battles, or if you did Alchemagic, this goes into your soul, and you can countercharge 1. So that's what that card does, and that's what I call it. But really, before I touch on him, let me cover the basics at least. So we are playing 4 Greed Shade. There are deck builds that have reduced Greed Shade, which is fine with me. It just depends on the long-term picture that you're trying to accomplish. Because I am playing Bilber, the card that you call becomes even more important if they do something. When they either call or if they're just on board, can they do something moving forward, right? So Greed Shade just became much more impactful because when it's just placed in general, you can use its skill to discard 1 mill 2 and then grab any card from your drop zone into your hand. So you may have, let's say maybe a grade 3 Beatrice that you want to ride and you mill it from Bilber, but you superior call a Greed Shade. Greed Shade can now fix your hand and grab that Beatrice to help with that ride consistency. If you mill triggers like an over trigger or a heal guardian, you can grab those now for shield value, so they're not lost because you milled. And then this can get you other cards if you want to further build a board to extend. Maybe you want to grab a Columbard and then call the Columbard by hand to further extend, and now you have a board presence in the early game to work with. And kind of go from there. So there's many options you can do with lines of play. This card is also really, really good defensively when you're G-Guard. And I'll show those Negrolily plays too as well, so people can understand what does Greed Shade even do with Negrolily. It does a lot. So with Columbard, it's on place, Counterblast 1, search your deck for up to anything, mill it, and then revive anything in your drop zone. That's super great because that means any card in your deck is accessible with Columbard. Now, the next question is what do you fetch for? 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a Ghost Ship just to filter that out because it's one of the cards that you can use early on. Unfortunately, we can't use Cannoneer before Generation Break, so there's no point of getting Cannoneer. But you could always send pieces and revive other pieces, such as Greed Shade, and Greed Shade can fix cards into your hand, so you could do that route too. So this can fetch to fix your hand with Greed Shade, and so you can see that it has flexibility. This card triggers because it's also used by Bilber. So if you call Columbard, let's say, again, you don't open up with Columbard, so you don't ride grade 2 with Columbard, it might be a different one. This can at least come out from Bilber, and then this can fetch any pieces that you may want to use to have an aggressive early game, or at least a way to build up for that early defense against their grade 3 turn. And then going into the rest of the grade 2s, we're playing the 1-ups here. You want to play Cannoneer over here because it has access to the retire. So when this is revive from the drop zone and you Counterblast 1, it's GB1, you can retire something, and if you're hollow, you draw a card in addition to that. So this helps not only in your main phase to get rid of stuff, you can do this in your battle phase with Nightstorm technically too. You can get rid of Haunterlace, you can get rid of other cards that are annoying, but a lot of this is mainly used for the defensive play and the Negrolily play, which I'll show later on. So it's like a pseudo denial Griffin play. And we have the Ghost Ship. This is that first go-to card for Columbard in most cases. The reason is because that when it attacks, it gets plus 15k, so it's a 24k beater. And then you, at the end of the battle, retires to draw a card. So this starts generating you advantage. This removes itself from field, so then your opponent doesn't attack the The rear guards, for example, so you can have a full board, not a full board, but you can have a front row of no front row rear guards. So that way you're not damage deny, especially if you use the only counterblast that you have with Column Bar. They would have to ride up and pass turn if they want to damage deny you Stow. And then the grade 2 stoicheia unit, I am experimenting with the different stoicheia units. I thought about Alania, and I've tried it. And then one of the things that I realized with Bilber is that Alania doesn't work except for only being called from hand. So if you Bilber into Alania, that doesn't work. If you can play the other card, I think it's like a fox thing. I'll put it on the screen too. You can play that card, and it like sacrifices itself to give something else power, like a plus 10k. So there's some room for experimentation. In fact, some people may play 2 or 3 grade 2 stoicheia units to help with like just the reliability of the 10k. Some people just play them because it's a 10k base that you could ride that has some effect to it. Otherwise, you would just play vanilla Granblue 10ks at that point. But you want at least to have something with some kind of effect. The reason I picked this guy is because this may not come up every time, but it's nice to have something there. And then you can easily set it up with Greed Shade or reviving like a board with Obadiah, and then put it behind the Vanguard. And so when you're doing your multi-attack, all you have to do is to achieve 5 attacks, which normally you would in that case. And then at the end of the turn, this will go into your solo to countercharge in addition to like a Grenache or any countercharging that you have. So it really sets your resources up for the following turn and also during your opponent's turn, because the Negrolily play does need Sol. And if you're being aggressive with Beatrice's skill, you will run out of Sol. So this card just kind of helps fill in the gap too as needed. And then next turn you can reride and do your shenanigans at that point. On to the grade 1s. We're playing 12 grade 1s. We're playing 3 Bilber, 3 Negrobone, 3 Rollock, 1 Dolph the Ghostly, 1 Honolly, and 1 Bell. So with Bilbers, I was trying 4 Bilbers. I know this is a card that Outer Orange really emphasized in one of her recent videos, so I reduced it to 3. It's kind of like the Skeleton Seas Navigator in Premium. If you see it early on, then that's great. You usually just need to see 1 or 2 copies and you're pretty good at that point. But once you see it in the late game, it's 5k shield. So it kind of hurts with the shield quality of view at that point. And at that point, you might shred Obadiah anyway, so you don't necessarily need to mill with it. Or superior call something, especially if it's going to get called in the back row. At that late game, you really want to like start building up your field much more effectively at that point, so it just kind of loses meaning. So that's why I reduced it to 3. So I think 3 is a good sweet spot. If you don't like the Bilber, I would recommend maybe like Tommy the Ghosty, because Tommy the Ghosty can at least check the top 5 and add a grade 3. Any of your grade 3s that you grab, you can either ditch them or add them for right consistency, but the other card that comes to mind are grade 3 heals. Those are valuable to be able to survive a lot easier in other matchups. So if you feel like you want to go that route, Time of the Ghosty would be good. I would recommend probably at least 2. And then you can fill the rest of the grade 1s with different texts if you want. And I think there's room for counter chargers too. So if you want to add a counter charger in the grade 1 or grade 2 slot for other cards like Damien or Jesse the Ghosty or King Serpent and so on, there's options in that too as well. With the Negrobone, so because we're playing Bilber, Negrobone becomes much more valuable because it could be one of the cards that get milled in the process with Bilber. Not only that, but it's a card choice that you can send with Obadiah too, that you can just have it ready in the drop zone, so you could start reviving Skull Dragons either that same turn or that final turn that you're trying to push and win. And what's really cool with Negrobone is that it returns itself to the bottom of the deck. So if you feel like if your opponent's thinking like, okay, they're gonna get close to deck out, no. Negrobone can kind of trick them and it's like, no, I can still do my drive checks, I can still do a bad bounty play. That's what it helps with that regard. But really it gets your Skull Dragons on board a lot easier, and then you can stride into bad bounty much more easier. You can stride into Bartholomew more easy, and then you can focus on maximizing their effects during the battle phase much more easier. And we have Rolocks over here. Again, it's just a defensive quality. If you don't have any Rolocks, again, I recommend other choices such as like Tommy and so on that you could replace with Rolocks just to help your survivability. Wow, that's a word. And again, it's a 1-card PG. What I appreciate about this card is that in the late game, it's a 10k shield still. Bilber is a 5k shield. I don't know why they did that in overdress, but that's a whole topic. But with Rollock, it's 10k shield, so it's at least some kind of shield value at the sense, so it's not a totally useless card in the late game. And you may be asking yourself, wouldn't you want to have like more combo pieces because it is Granblue? And yes and no. Yes, because you want to focus on the primary combo pieces that you're always wanting to see every game, or if not, 9 times out of 10. You have room to play other techs to be more just, in this case, defensively. That's why I play 3 Rolocks. I see the grade 1 PG, for example. You could technically play more Sentinels into the trigger, but I wanted to have more room with crit pressure in the triggers, and that made me want to go back to maybe playing at least one grade 1 Sentinel with the Ghosty. It's on place from anywhere, so you can do the Negrolily J-Guard play too as well, so you can revive it from the drop zone, get a perfect guard that way too, so it's just super handy. Plus, if you write it, it's a draw and then discard, so it helps dig deeper into your deck, set up your drop zone and so on. These other two are more techs, so the Hanali and the Bell. So Hanali has been used in Granblue for probably years now at this point, and it's helped to deal multi-attack rearguard types of decks. So once you get to the 5th battle, either you or your opponent, you must pay a counterblast in order to do that attack. And so that way it limits your opponent's attack. There is a play with the Negrolily play, which I will show, that you can call this during your opponent's battle phase. So you don't necessarily have to have it on field when they start their turn, or end your turn, I should say. And because you may have limited counterblast, Negrolily can use that counterblast if you only have one left. And then the Hanali will just turn down, face down nothing. It has a skill that forces you to counterblast essentially, but it's not mandatory to do its skill. It's just one of those things, like it's a consequence, but you can get around it. And then the Bell is there for the Narukami matchup. So if you're expecting Narukami, which is something that you should consider, because one, Vanquisher is a viable deck still. It's really good. You got new Eradicator support in the sense of Vow in reverse as well, and even the Ascended forms are applicable. Sometimes they mix and match too on top of that. There's a Dungaree variant too, but I haven't played against it, but sometimes they mix them up too as well. But you should watch out for Vanquisher and Eradicators for sure. So Bell kind of just helps with that. You can keep it in hand to be able to return your drop zone, so it makes it a lot harder. They had to restart their Stunverse plays, so they're not so ahead of you, especially if you're playing the long game at that point. So it's just one of those things that help with that matchup too. Onto the grade zeros, we're playing a lot of crit. As you can see, you got 10 crit up here, you got the overtrigger, a draw PG, the Grenache starter from G-Era, and then the Grenache starter for V-Series as your main starter. So with the crits, you want to have a high amount because you'll be affected in with Obadiah. You'll be having a lot of drive checks with bad bounty turns. You'll see 5 drive checks essentially. And even early on, getting a crit can be vital. It kind of gets you ahead at the game as well, because you may damage the knight in certain times, but it's just having enough crit to be able to aggressive, especially when you decked in. It's just like if they take a Vanguard attack and they're at 3 damage, like you can put them to 3 to 6 potentially as well. So it helps eliminate as much of the factor of multi-attacking to finish the deal, because you have to be cognizant of the over trigger defensively too. So if they have it triggered during their damage attack, your turn does shut off, unfortunately. So it's just one of those things like, okay, if I could finish them off with a Vanguard attack with crit, why not? And so the Chat the Ghosty is super helpful because it's the pay cost of Stride. It's a Ghosty, so this becomes a 20k shield with Beatrice being on Vanguard, so super helpful. So you could just, dictate there. Most of the grade 3s you'll be milling out with Obadiah or discarding or riding, so then you need some card like this guy to be able to pay the cost of Stride with 1 card. So super helpful, super appreciative. We're playing Wild Seas Banshee. This is the GB1 that goes into soul when your Vanguard attacks plus 10k. You need a way to refill your soul. This is a card that helps. You could play the Rough Seas from like the beginning of the Vanguard days, but it's a weaker shield, it's a weaker power up trigger, so I wanted to go this route, and I felt like this is a lot more worth it too. And then we're playing the 30k Sentinels Rampage Shade. This is a 1-card guard, and you can use this with Negrolily plays, so that way you have a big fat shield. You can use this with Greed Shade early on if you milled it, and then you have 1 card that's super defensive and can help deal with most attacks in the early game. So that's why this is even appreciated at 2. And then we got the over trigger, which is another crit in a sense. It's every trigger essentially you heal and draw 2 and all that kind of stuff. And to go along with the drawing, you have Gustion. So just be cognizant of these cards still being in your deck. If your deck size is low, you will deck out, and you will mess up the ratios that you're trying to play with your deck size. So just be cognizant of that. That's why I don't play too many draw PGs. But as you can see, we're playing the 2 crit Sentinels, the PG in the grade 1 and a PG in the grade 0. So you have 4 Sentinels in total with the deck. That's still good. Again, Negrolily can revive this and also use that as a PG, which is super helpful. And we got ESOL, the Grenache G-Era one. So this, at the end of the turn, if it's hollow, it dies. It counter charges too. Super impactful. So this is your main way of returning your counterblast. And again, you have the grade 2. You can play other cards too if you really want that counterblast management, such as Jesse, King Serpent, and a few others too that may work. Damien would work because your Vanguard is ghosty most of the time too, so that's an option too. Onto the strides, we were playing 9 strides, so we're playing 2 of the big Obadiah, 2 of the big Bad Bounty, 1 Galleon, 1 original Obadiah, 1 Bartholomew, and the Megiddo Ballerina package as well. So with Big Obadiah over here, this is the main card that you want to set up. 9 times out of 10, you do first stride with it. You counterblast 1, flip anything, look at your deck, send up to 5 cards from your deck into the drop zone, and then Superior Call 2 cards for every face-up card in the G zone. They get plus 5k until the end of the turn. So super good card to set up and get your pieces in your drop zone, so definitely play that. If you don't open up with Bilber too, the second one may come up too, so that's why I play 2 just in case. You got Bad Bounty too to be in the aggressive play, and then also even in matchups where they may like lock your field, stun your field, you may just want to keep having turns back to back with restanding Vanguards in a sense, or multi-attack with the Vanguard. So that's why I play the second Bad Bounty, and we have the Immortal Galleon. This is the GB8. It's free, so once you get to the point where you start flipping cards and G-guarding, you'll get to GB8 pretty easily in those long games. So this card becomes an option to be able to stride for free, and then you can use your Counterblast for maybe like a Night Storm, or if you didn't have any Counterblast, then this can help you kind of go from there and really just go from there actually. And so we have the original Obadiah. This is where, like, in the early game, like first stride, if your opponent damage deny you, whether you have 1 damage and you already used it, or you're at 0 damage, then Obadiah here can be useful. It mills up to 3 cards, and then if you mill 2 or more hollow units, you can revive a ghosty normal unit behind this guy. So before it was kind of useless because you would revive like Tommy the Ghosty, the Stride Fighter, but now you can revive Beatrice, and then Beatrice can use her Soul Blast skill to revive something else in the front row, which you can work with. So that could be a ghost ship, that could be something else. And you do play 3 units that are hollow units, so you're playing Grenache, Night Storm, and Cannoneer. So most of the time you're gonna send those anyway with an Obadiah. So you're already doing what you're trying to accomplish. Now the question is, like, can you maximize on top of that while you're at 0 damage? And you have Bartholomew, like I mentioned, it's a great finisher. I would recommend at least 1. This card, it can be, you know, something that you can use at that point. In fact, if you do stride into it and you're 30 cards or more than likely that's the last play you'll be doing. If you somehow survive and you still have a deck size, you may go into something else, but it's really hard to drive check at that point, especially if you're trying to use Necrobones to get that deck size back to how it is. Be cautious of using Negrobone and discarding Protect Markers. Protect Markers would not go to the drop zone, they get removed from play. So Negrobone removes itself, that's already 1 card less in the drop zone than you initially started, and then it revives a card from the drop zone. So that's the second card. So if you had 31 and you discarded a Protect Marker, you go to 29 and you can lock yourself out of the guard restriction just like that if you don't have a way to fuel back the drop zone. So that way you're in the happy place, the happy spot. Megiddo and the Ballerina package. Megiddo, again, it's another win con. If you get Drachma and you're stuck at grade 1, grade 2, if you have another copy and you have face-up, G-Zone cards, you can Ultimate Stride with that. So it's one of those backup plans. I tell people that hey, you can still do that just in case in the late game. Ballerina is free as well. So if you, instead of doing all of that, you want to do a Ballerina first stride to make your strides free, you can do that as well. Onto the G cards. We're playing 7 G guards. We're playing 2 Negrolily, 2 Negronora, 1 of the new one, Oriana, 1 Negro mode, and 1 Colburn. So with the basics, the Negrolily place, which I'll go much more in depth after this, it's G guard, Counterblast 1, retires something on your board, and you can revive a normal ghosty card. And then this card gets plus 10k shield. The interaction is with Beatrice, which I'll show, so Beatrice can revive something else, and you can kind of go from there. Very valuable. You may have the second one to come up, so why not have 2, and it actually gives you value. So it depends on the resources that you have available too. You may not have enough soul, or you may have enough Counterblast, so this can be the Counterblast issue, or this can be where you have the Soul Blast issue, and then Negronora can be where you have the Counterblast issue because she Soul Blast 1, and then she flips another card helping with the GBA count, and you can revive any 2 cards with different grades from the drop zone and put them onto guard circle. Over triggers, PGs are ideal. You got other cards like Rollock and stuff in so many ways. So you got options at that point too. And then you got the Oriana. So this card's really unique, and I think it's worth playing 1 at least. So when your unit, so when this is placed on Guardian Circle, you can Counterblast 1. The attacking unit gets minus crit 1 for every 10 cards in your drop. So one, this does not choose the unit. It just says that the attacking unit gets it. It hits the ward away where you can get around some resist effects. So it reduces like threats. So if something is crit 3, you reduce it to potentially crit 0 if you have 30 cards in the drop zone, or crit 1 if you have 20 plus cards in the drop zone. So this card can come up. This can also deal with Vanguard attacks too. So if you feel like, hey, I can't like guard the Vanguard wholly without going into too much resources. Like if you don't have Soul, for example, you can't Negrolily into a PG, then you're like out of luck. And Negrolily may not come up, especially if you don't have any regards to retire. You can't use its skill because it's part of cost. So then your next option would be Oriana to help stop that. Negrommo is when you're G-guarding first and you don't have any cards face up in the G-zone, so Negrommo is not an option. This is a Soul Blast. It gets plus 5k for every 5 cards in the drop zone, so that's why we still play at least one. Coburn is a new addition that I'm trying out. This is where you can discard one, and then when your opponent's Vanguard attacks, this card gets plus 5k for every 2 cards in hand. So depending on the situation, you may want to save extra guard for a bigger rear guard attack, and the Vanguard may be something where like I can G-guard into this without worrying about something else, and it's free. It doesn't use counterblast, it doesn't use Soul like these cards. So this is where maybe you don't have any of those resources too, so this can come up in that sense too. So I'm trying it out, see if I like it moving forward, but it's something to try out. Onto the combos. So I'm going to show off quickly like some of the winning images, just so for you get a better idea visually. Showing and telling is the best way to learn and retain things. So when you pay the cost of, before you even pay the cost of stride, one of the things you can do to extend, just like I mentioned, is writing Night Mist over your Beatrice, and then you can pay the cost of stride, go into the bad bounty. And let's say we just only have 2 counterblasts just to work with. You want to use Negro Bones to bottom deck themselves to revive Skull Dragons. So here they are. And now a very easy play that you can do is just leave it like this. You also, I would recommend doing this at 5 damage. So you want to attack with the Skull Dragon first. This will retire to kill itself. This will attack, retire itself. That's 2 attacks. Now your Vanguard can attack. And then any triggers that you have, triple drive, you can stack. Counterblast 1, this goes back to deck. Then you can ride a Night Rose on top of the Night Mist. This is where you can break ride. This will revive. One thing you can do to kind of still benefit from the triggers is that if you do have a booster, this would be a bad example. Let's just say you have a Rollock in this example. So any triggers that you may have, you can put it at least on the booster itself. And then this can now attack this way. This will be the weakest technically. You can either keep the booster or just put it behind the Vanguard. It really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but it doesn't hurt to put it behind the Vanguard for more power. So the Vanguard's a little more threatening. This will retire. This is assuming these Skull Dragons are really big too. So when you attack, this also gets a plus 5k boost, and this gets power as well. So you might as well take advantage of that. You revive the Skull Dragon with the Beatrice that you have extra in your Soul, and then this will Soul Blast, let's say the Beatrice that you had in Vanguard, and then this will revive the next Skull Dragon. So remember, Night Rose close a column, so that's why Beatrice is even used to get the second one. Twin Drive, and then this can be attacking. Oh, this also dies, which attributes to more of the Skull Dragon power. And now you have a rearguard left on your rearguard circle. This is important because you can set out with Negrolily play still. So super vital in that sense. But as you can see, you have 6 Skull Dragon attacks using 2 counterblasts, assuming that you went to 5 and maybe like these are all face down and then you only have 2 open. So this makes it easier. You can extend with each counterblast with the Night Storm too. So there is that. The next winning image play is that you stride into Bartholomew, assuming that you have 30 cards more in the drop zone by this point. You may be at high damage as well. And let's just assume you only have 1 counterblast left. It makes it a lot easier. The same typical play, use Negrobones to revive Skull Dragons during the main phase, so you have big beaters, and if you have any boosters, you can if you want. But I would recommend at least having a booster. I'll show you why as I go. So you can attack with them first, and again, if you have 30 cards or more, they have to guard with 3 cards or more. So that's 1 attack, then this will attack for another attack, and now this can attack, and then you use the skill to counterblast to revive 3 units. So you can revive, let's say, Beatrice here. Actually, you could do it this way. Let's just say you have another booster that you call, right? And then you call Beatrice here. You call a Night Storm or a Ghost Skull Dragon here. And you can call something else. If you have an extra counterblast, you can further extend with Night Storm. In this example, I won't have anything. And then you can Soul Blast to revive the second Skull Dragon. So let's just say this is really our only counterblast left. So this might be another thing to consider with King Serpent, so you can counter charge during the battle phase too. But it just really depends on that in that effort too. So this will do triple drive. Again, they have to guard 3 or more. Stack them onto these boosters that you can use. So it's just very big, very big. And then these die, of course, at the end. So you have a back row, and it just takes advantage of that. The boosters are more handy if you had the extra counterblast and you have to use cards like Nightstorm. So the Nightstorm, for example, ooh, there we go. So the Nightstorm, for example, in this case, will not be as big as Skull Dragon. So then when you kill attack with this, then this can attack boosted, especially if you have any triggers, you could have stacked that on that too as well. And then at the end of the battle, this can revive another, where is she? Beatrice. Well, instead of reviving the Beatrice from the back to bring the Skull Dragon, you would just save it for this play, and then Soul Blast, and then this will revive the Skull Dragon here. So now the Beatrice here is only 12k, but now you have a booster that could hit numbers, or it just hits a better number. And again, each of these attacks are asking for 3 or more cards too. So it's just like impactful, but I wanted to show at least the one Counterblast play, and then after that, you can extend more depending on how much Counterblast and Soul Blast you have. The next win con is, like I mentioned, is Megiddo. So if you Ultimate Stride, that means you discard a copy of the Vanguard that you have currently. You go into this, you can Counterblast 2, revive up to 5 rear guards and give them plus 5k, and the swapping abilities. So you can have something like this. It doesn't really matter where they end up. They can swap easily too. So you can have your 3 Skull Dragons, another beater like Ghost Ship, and then your Nightstorm. So you can attack with Ghost Ship first because it's the weakest beater that you have. This will swap with something else, and then you can retire to draw a card. This can attack, swap with something else, retires. This will attack, again, swap with something else, and then this will attack, and then this doesn't have to necessarily swap, but it will retire itself. Your Vanguard can attack. Now you can stack all the triggers onto the Nightstorm. Then your Nightstorm can attack at the end of the battle, Counterblast 1, and revive another Skull Dragon. So you have 4 Skull Dragon attacks with Ghost Ship and a Nightstorm, and then the Vanguard as well. So just really impactful, very powerful. In case you have nothing else, and this is probably the better play, feel free to go into it. Now onto the Negrolily lines of play that I want to show. So this is for players that aren't really familiar with the Negrolily combo. So you need at least 1 rearguard to work with. I put the Beatrice as rearguard to just help with this a lot easier. You can Counterblast 1, retire it, immediately revive it because it revives a normal ghost. So you'll get more shield value too. But when you Soul Blast, this is where you have access to pretty much anything in your deck. Mainly in your drop zone, but you can also have access to your deck as well. So let me start with the drop zone first. So the first one would be reviving a Cannoneer. And so you can hollow it, then use the next Counterblast to retire something during the battle phase. So this can deal with 1 attack, while this retires another rearguard that's still attacking. So it can take care of 2 attacks and mess up their attack pattern too on top of that, while drawing 2 cards. And because you're on Beatrice, and you're still guarding technically, so the cards you call can also be used as intercepts, and Beatrice gives a 5k and an intercept ability to this. So it's another 10k shield on top of its 10k power up as well. So you can have a good size shield with some retirement behind it. If you didn't have Cannoneer, but you really needed, and you had access to, let's say, a 3rd Counterblast, you need 3 Counterblasts for this one, you revive a Columbard. Columbard can go into Counterblast, and you can put this behind Vanguard or behind the run if you want. You can search your deck for any card that you want now, and then you can immediately revive it, such as a Cannoneer. Then the Cannoneer can Counterblast and actually just go from there. So as you can see, this Columbard gives you just the ability to grab anything from your deck. So in case you're going against, like, let's say Norakami, and you don't want to put too many stuff in that drops on too much yet, you can have Cannoneer still left in deck, and this can help get rid of that while you have a Bell still in your hand, and then you return everything if you need it. So it's just like depending on the patterns that you have in the setup, the game states. Other cards that you may have access to might be dropping a Hanali. So, for example, if you use your Counterblast already, let's say you only have 1 and it was the G-Guard, you can drop a Hanali at the right time, and your opponent now like, crap, I can't extend attacks more without paying Counterblast, which sometimes they can't, and then sometimes they don't want to anyway because it uses too much resources for it, and they can't finish you guarantee-wise. So this helps drop the Hanali and keep it safe from any retire effects during the battle phase they may have to. So Aqua Force is a good example, is a gem bold. So by the time they attack with gem bold, you can actually call this and be like, no. And after that, they can't retire anything. And so any of the regards they have still standing that are 5th battle or more need that Counterblast to push up, for example. And especially if you're going against Excel class that get really wide with Excel circles, this just helps kind of mitigate that a bit. The other card that you can do is Grenache. And so like I mentioned with Grenache, you discard mill 2 and grab anything you want as shield value. A couple of options you can get the same heal trigger that you use for this G-Guard, grab it back, and then G-Guard again to get a second G-Guard if you need the shield value. You can also get a perfect guard, and then this you can now place it to Guardian Circle and then discard something for a perfect guard. So this is another way to actually perfect guard outside of Negrolily using a G-Guard such as Negrolily. If you have the over trigger, this might be like another card to drop with 50k shield, which is valuable. If you didn't have that, maybe a 30k Sentinel, such as the Crit Sentinel. And so the last thing that you may want to do is that maybe you don't need to interact with them, and maybe it's just a normal G-Guard play. You can still use Negrolily to get the benefit of that shield value and then revive Grenache. So why would you do this is because if you only have 1 Counterblast left at the end of your turn, and then you use this to Counterblast, now you have 0. But when you hollow this, it will retire during their end phase. So this will retire, and now you go into your turn with 2 Counterblasts to work with. So you went from 1 to 2 in that sense. So you kind of like countercharge basically during your opponent's turn to be able to like extend moving forward too. And if they give you a damage, so let's say 5th damage, then at that point you can have 3 and you can go nuts. The last thing I want to show is really like the Bilber turns. So when you write to grade 1, let's say you're going first too, you can call this behind the back row, you can Soul Blast 1, retire this. Now you check the top 3, mill 2, and call 1. So what you can call, let's say with the beaters to make this easier, you can call Ghost Ship if you see it. This won't be able to go to the front row just yet until the following turn, but if you're going first, you can't even attack, so it doesn't matter. So then let's say they give you a damage, you get a heal, whatever. Then your next following turn, if you want to write, let's say maybe Cannoneer, because that's the only grade 2 you have in hand, this can move up now and you can further extend. This can attack and draw you a card. Another beater beforehand could be Skull Dragon, and it may not be as big, but it's still a beater that can hit at least maybe 20k to hit some numbers, or 18k, and it could be another resource to be able to be aggressive in that sense. Other options too, like I mentioned, is Grenache. Grenache can even be used while you're at grade 1 too, so it doesn't really matter if you do this grade 1 or grade 2 turn. Whenever you open with the Bilber, it's generally good to just use it. Just be mindful of your soul and everything like that. And because you do this, you'll be able to get cards like defensively easier, like a grade 3 heal. You can be grabbing your right target. You can set up for a Honolly real quick too, or you can get a Rollock too as well defensively. So you got options to work with. If you need to set up with a Honolly ASAP, you can call it, and then if you have any Counterblast, that's fine. Again, you can also, with a Bilber, if you have a Counterblast, for example, Bilber can call Columbard to the back row. This can Counterblast 1 now during your grade 2 turn, and then fetch and grab Reed Shade, and Reed Shade can mill and do the same thing, and then grab all these other cards that you were going to grab, and then this can mill as well. If your mill wasn't that great, sometimes you may mill into a Beatrice, and that can be revived into with the Bilber back row, and then this can Soul Blast to get something in the front row that might be something by something else, and it could be maybe a Great Shade or something. So it just depends on how you mill, how you want to do this, but it's just something, just have another body on the board, and then the setup is not there. You can even use the grade 1 from the Vanguard and then just call it, if that's a better beater. If your opponent's a grade 1 still, then you could just poke at least, and then your Vanguard can attack and do a drive check. So you have flexibility in the early game, and so that's why I just wanted to take some time to show with at least Bilber what it can do, and your milling cards too, to set up that drop song count as well. And that's the deck profile, the lines of play that you can see. So I just wanted to show that off because not everybody knows the lines of play and why Granblue has like very unique builds sometimes. It can be daunting trying to build a Granblue deck, and then it's like, what are all these texts for? Like, when do you use them? When is the best way to use these cards? Like, all these things that come to head can be daunting, and I know during Metafy sessions, when it comes to Granblue, people are just mind blown sometimes, where like, hey, did you know you can call Honolly with Negrolily? Did you know you can get anything from deck by using, you know, Beatrice into Columbard and stuff like that? So people are just mind blown, and so it kept coming up, And so I figured I'd use a video too for those people that may not know, so that you can always just refer this to as well. And then that could be helpful too going into a Metafy session if you're interested. So that way you can have a good base knowledge of it too, and then kind of like just go from there too. So again, this deck is really fun too. There's so much to do. It's a deck that takes a lot more effort to get familiarized, know to do the right plays, but it is rewarding. And that's something that I always have Granblue in my back pocket just in case I go into a meta game that I feel like other decks may not be as potent. So Granblue tends to be a deck or a clan in general that's pretty resilient and can be still like a solid choice going into meta games, especially if we have a one that's forming up and we're not too sure what could be like top 5 decks kind of thing. So this also, like I mentioned, is kind of built to have some aggression but able to survive in the early game and deal with decks that are like crazy right now in that point. So I just wanted to share and also share some ideas that people may not be as known. They can kind of get an idea from one person or two, but seeing it more on YouTube is super helpful. Like I mentioned, there are some card choices I mentioned. There are other grade 2 stoicheia units that you can try out. There are other counter chargers you can try out. There's Bilber that is something that I'm trying out, so I wanted to show that as well. And then you got the other techs like Bell, Hanali, and there's so many more that you can use. I wouldn't say right or wrong build at a certain time. It dictates the what you build for that meta game, so just be open to your options. You can see Granblue as a toolbox, but also remember that you're trying to do the main thing, right? Keep the main thing the main thing. So that's always important too. And if you really like the mat too behind this is Nex LvL Gaming, by the way. You can use the affiliate link down below for a 10% discount on your next purchase. There's more designs coming out, especially overdress, so if you love that, that's amazing. I love this because it's Granblue with Zorga. As you can see, it's very fitting. And also use 50 card shop code Jaime for a 5% discount if you shop from them, or also TCG player using the affiliate link as well to support the channel. And if you're interested in Metafy, go ahead and check out my profile. You can ask questions, whether it be here on YouTube, Discord, or the social media. You can even ask questions on Metafy as well, if you're interested and want to learn more too. So I welcome new students. It's been a blast. It's been impactful. I've already had students that have taught recently too in the BROs and even in the KSE events too. So it's super humbling. Just to help you guys out with your goals. That's the biggest thing. It's more for you than it is for me at that point too. And I just wanted to mention that too. And if you like the video, please share with an amigo. It helps the channel out to grow bigger and everything, and so I can keep posting quality content like this as well. And leave a comment. I'd like to hear your feedback. What are your thoughts on some of the cards, or maybe some of the things that you're trying out too? I'm open to feedback. This is meant to be a channel that's supposed to be engaging with their audience too, so definitely let me know, and I'm happy to comment back below as well. And so with that, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. See you, amigos. Bye.